Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. This is the Biblicist. Yeah, I've just changed my name to the Biblicist. And I'm actually starting a series covering a bit on how New Testament, quote unquote, scholarship has actually affected Christology in many ways. So today I'll just start part one of this series and just focus on certain passages in Acts of the Apostles, places where Jesus, in our older translations, our older English translations like the Dewey Rheims or say the King James, was quoted as the Son of God in these passages over here. But in modern translations, that word son has been replaced by the word servant. So let's take a look. We'll begin with Acts 3:13. Here's the Dewey Rheims. The God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, the God of our fathers, had glorified his son Jesus, whom you indeed delivered up and denied before the face of Pilate. When he judged, he should be released. All right. And here's your authorized King James version, not the 1611 one, but the authorized one. Again, that word here is rendered as son. But once we come to modern translations, you pick up any modern translation. I'm just showing the New King James Version. This word has been rendered as servant. So take a note. That was Acts 3:13. Okay. So I will proceed to Acts 3:26, and they have done the same butchery. Okay, again, looking at the Dewey Rheims, to you first God, raising up his son, hath sent him to bless you, that everyone may convert himself from his wickedness. Likewise, in the King James Version, the authorized King James Version, it's again son, and again this butchery in your modern versions. Like pick up an NIV, pick up a modern English version, pick up an ESV, you'll find that butchery going on. Okay. Now let's go to Acts 4:27. And you see the same thing happening. Blah, blah, blah. Thy holy child Jesus. Okay. Again, in your authorized King James Version, the passage again reads, Thy holy child Jesus. But once I go to the New King James Version, it's not just the King James Version, it's most of your modern translations. It's again rendered as servant. Get it? And finally, let's go to Acts 4:30. Now, in Acts 4:30, by stretching forth thy hands to cures and signs and wonders to be done by the name of thy holy Son, Jesus. Again, in King James Version, again, it's Jesus. And here you again see this perversion happening over here. All right. Now, just to give you a gist, this rendering of the word Son or Jesus happens about 6 times in Acts of the Apostles, where Jesus is said to be the child / Son of God. Actually 7 times, if I'm going to quote Acts 8:37, but I'll come to that part later. But why is it that these 4 times where Jesus is said to be the Son of God is rendered as servant? Why is that? Okay, now we'll come to the parts where it's still showing that Jesus is the Son of God. And let's go, for example, in Acts 9, verse number 20. And immediately in the synagogues, he began proclaiming Jesus, that he is the Son of God. This is Acts 9:20. And this is the point where St. Paul begins to preach after his conversion. So Paul gets converted as a Christian in Acts 9, which we are all familiar about, that story. He sees a vision of Christ, he falls down, becomes blind, then gets healed by this Christian called Ananias, gets baptized, and then he starts preaching. All right. And once again, you see this in Acts 13:33. Let's come back over here. That this God has fulfilled to the children of them to us, having raised up Jesus, as also in the psalm it has been written, the second son of me I today have begotten you. All right. So once again, they have identified Jesus as the Son of God. Now, why this pivotal moment? If you're looking at secular scholars or even Muslims, they have kind of caught up on this, especially Muslim apologists like Shabir Ali, about these issues in our translations. He takes up a modern translation and he says, see, over here it's mentioned that he was the servant, but it's only from Acts 9 onwards. That is when Paul got converted. He starts saying that it's the Son of God. So, this is clear evidence that this invention about Jesus being Son of God was Paul's invention and had nothing to do with the disciples. Okay, so let's start debunking that, shall we? So you can clearly see that there is an anti-trinitarian agenda over here, and that just goes to show that your modern translations, although they are saying that they are based off on so-called earlier manuscripts or critical texts, that they are not really reliable. Why is that? Just because a text is older doesn't mean that the quality of the text is necessarily reliable, is it? So let's get to Acts 3 and look at those verses in question, shall we? What was the first verse I talked about? Acts 3, verse number 13. All right, so let's have a look. And here we go. Now here in the interlinear, just looking for that word. Yeah, they have translated that word as servant, and the Greek word was paida. All right, paida. Excuse me for butchering the Greek. So if I hover over that word, it gives me different meanings. Servant isn't the first meaning. It usually says, perhaps from pio, means a boy or a girl and a child, especially a slave or a servant. And if I'm just going to say Google Translate, just having a look over there, just a second, I'll just copy and paste this. Paida, sorry. Here we go. Go to Google Translate. And what's the first meaning that actually turns up? Let's maximize the screen for everybody's benefit by zooming in. Here we go, paida. The meaning here is directly saying rendered as child. Why are you using the last word? The last synonym rather, which is servant. Likewise, if I'm going to Acts 3, verse number 26, and once again, you'll see that perversion happening. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Yep, it's again rendered as servant. Let's go to Acts 4. What was it? Verse number 27. So people, please take a note of this. As you go along the videos, you could rewind it, play it again. Again, paida is rendered as servant, although it could mean a boy or a girl and a child, especially a slave or a servant. All right. And finally, let's go to Acts 4:30. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Paidos. Okay, this time it's rendered as paidos. Let's see what it means. And here we go. Again, it just means child. And once again, if I'm hovering over this, there are other meanings for this. Can be a boy or a girl and a child, especially a slave or a servant. Now, you see, 4 places before Paul's conversions, wherever Jesus was said to be a son of God or a child of God, they have rendered that word as servant. This is strictly an attack on Christology and the deity of Christ, robbing him of his kingship and his lordship over all creation. And just to put that lie, saying Paul invented this Christology about Jesus being divine. This is blasphemy. I'm not telling you to get rid of all your modern translations. Some places in your modern translations, they paraphrase it much better than your older translations, but it's just that the language in the older translations, many a time, since it's written in Shakespeare and English, it's harder to understand. So my word of advice, that is my opinion. You can take it or leave it, or take it with a grain of salt. If you are a Protestant, have your King James Version with you and keep your modern versions, whether it's New King James or Modern English Version or ESV, or if you happen to be a Calvinist, but always comparing it with the King James, especially critical verses like this. And wherever it disagrees with the King James, go with the King James. All right. And if you happen to be a Catholic, we have our Dewey Rheims Bible, which is the English translation of the Latin Vulgate, which came out a year before the King James Version was printed and published. And you could see the evidence right here. And if you're a Catholic, once again, this is a version, the Dewey Rheims Bible, which was canonical according this translation, this English translation is rather canonical according to the Council of Trent. Okay. So please, it's not like your NRSV. What's it called again? New Revised Standard Version, or NAB, New American Bible. Especially if you're a Catholic, stay away from New American Bible. NRSV, read it with a grain of salt. Rather, you should go with the RSV over the NRSV. It's better. All right, or feel free to pick up any Protestant version. Okay, so don't start butchering the Protestant version. The same goes for you Protestants. Don't start butchering up Catholic Bibles just because some things have just been translated differently. Doesn't matter. But critical things like this, it matters. It creates a difference of heaven and earth. All right, okay. I think earlier on in the video, I touched upon Acts 8:37. So now let's go to Acts 8, shall we? Acts 8, KJV. Go to Bible Gateway. So this is one chapter before Paul gets converted. Okay, and this is perhaps the only place which has been translated properly, I think, in some modern versions. So if I'm going to Acts 8:37, here we go. And Philip said, I'm using the King James, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. All right, cool. Now, let's have a look at the New King James Version. How does it render itself? Let's have a look at Modern English Version, because it's, again, a modern translation of your King James Version. So let's have a look at Acts 8:37. Okay, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. All right, let's look at, so far it's in the clear, ESV, English Standard Version. Yeah, Calvinist, that's your favorite Bible, isn't it? And surprise, surprise, what happened to verse 37? They just ate it up. They just ate it up. If I'm going over the footnote, it says, some manuscript add all or most of verse 37. And Philip said, if you believe with all your heart, you may. And he replied, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Whoa, this is a shock, isn't it, Calvinists? They have straight away, they have cut this verse out, and they are appealing to modern scholarship and the so-called critical Alexandrian text. Once again, just because there are just about 3 or 4 manuscripts which support this variant reading, and you shouldn't be giving it more weightage just because it happens to be an older manuscript. The manuscripts which are in the majority have preserved Acts 8:37. Although they happen to be newer, they happen to be copies of older manuscripts which we haven't quite found. So doesn't necessarily mean that if some manuscript is older, that the quality is better. That's not necessarily the case. So once again, please start looking at modern scholarship very critically and take the word of your church fathers and their commentaries, especially in the first 2 centuries, over the commentaries and the opinions of modern scholars who have very shallow theology. These changes are subtle, but they are enough to butcher Christology. All right. So that's the end of part 1 in my series. I'll be putting the links to these verses and their interlinear in the description box below. Feel free to comment and state your opinions. And once again, feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you all. Take care.